is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 308.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. I feel like I'm saying this every week. It's a tough market, in case you were wondering. It's a tough market for entrepreneurs, for companies, for sellers. Sellers are struggling to make quota. Employees are worried about their jobs. And there's a lot of people looking for jobs, whether they currently have a job and they're worried and they want somewhere more secure. For example, a lot of people from VMware were worried about being let go, so they're looking for a job. And some were let go, unfortunately, and now they're still looking for a job. And some are just out of a job and they need to find something. So my guest today, his name is Chris Beaumont. He's a headhunter, a recruiter, and we decided to talk about what are some of the things that people can do early on to make sure that they can get a job as fast as possible. And the genesis of the discussion was us talking about like, hey, how finding a job is very much like sales. It's a sales process. So we dig into that and we discuss it in a little bit more details. I would suggest that if you're looking for a job, or even if you're not, to connect with Chris so that he can find you if he's looking for someone of your skills and talent. There's a bunch of headhunters. I'm very close friends with John Hodgson's if you're in EMEA. So you might want to connect with them as well. There's a bunch of people that you should connect with. And if you're interested in knowing who, let me know. But let's jump into the show and talk to Chris about headhunting. Mr. Beaumont.
Hello.
Repeat everything we've been talking about for the last minute.
On three.
How you doing? Welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you here. Let's start off with a brief introduction for the folks listening.
Yeah, of course. I have been in recruitment now for almost a decade, spanning different tech markets or industries, a lot of stuff in media, but predominantly my focus has always been around customer-facing teams from a commercial and technical standpoint, bit of a mix of both. So from pre-sale includes solutions, both pre and post sales, through onboarding and integration, support, and then customer success and technical account management. So the people that affect value for the customer directly or indirectly alongside the sales team or adjacent to them.
How does one get into recruiting? Like, I find it similar to sales engineering that no one talks about recruiting in school.
No,
but then
exactly.
I've met a bunch of recruiters and I have no idea how they got into it.
By accident.
Okay.
Honestly.
It sounds like a sales engineer, right?
Yeah, it's one of those things.
Elaborate, please.
Yeah. So I've got a sales background. So I left education. I worked in banking, sales, real estate, insurance, a few things. And recruitment seemed to be a good combination of all of the skills, like face-to-face, relationship building, calling, networking, all of the soft skills that you get from sales jobs. And then I just essentially got into it, started very trainee-like, and I'm still here. So initially it was very industry specific, so I spent a lot of time working in the broadcast and media space, again, mostly technology. Spent some time in LA, and I just think the job itself, you meet some really interesting people, you get to help people change their lives ultimately, and also the travel, the mixture of things that you get to do, trade shows, that type of thing. I think it just keeps you engaged because there can be so much to it. It can be a very, I don't want to use the word mundane, but I've said it now and we're being recorded, so mundane. But I think if you want it to be, it can also be very varied and interesting and engaging. You get to speak to a lot of different people. But yeah, by accident.
So how did the accident start? Like, was there a job posting that you applied to, or did someone come after you and
Through a
say,
friend.
"Hey, okay"?
Yeah, so one of my brother's best friends worked at my previous company, and I just sent him a message one day. This is when I was in banking, and just said, "Is there anything going? Can I come and speak to the powers that be?" And yeah, that was it. So yeah, just through chance and network. It's that classic. It's not what you know.
So what made you message him?
Good question. I think at the time, I mean, this is almost 10 years ago now. Yeah. So no. I mean, I kind of remember. I think banking changed significantly from the time that I started in it, and for the right reasons, quite frankly. The Financial Conduct Authority got involved with how banking sales were, well, how we approach them, and ultimately that changed the job quite significantly, and took a lot of the sales element out of it. So, and that's what I enjoyed at the time. I enjoyed the relationship side of it. I enjoyed, quite frankly, the money that came with it. And yeah, but it just kind of it changed the role significantly to something that became more advisory, but like overly to the point where you couldn't really do your job anymore. You weren't allowed to recommend anything to customers. So you have a suite of products, you know what's best for them, or at least you can identify that and talk to them about it, but you weren't allowed to anymore.
So you basically present a catalog and they pick.
It got to the point where we had to show videos rather than explain, so that, and the bank would track whether you'd shown them the video or not, the whole video. So you couldn't skip through it, or you had to show it from start to finish, and if you didn't, you couldn't move forward. So yeah, it just became very transactional.
Okay. And you started you started recruiting around 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, 2000 and early 2015, I think it was. So just under 10 years.
So like recruiting is kind of like everybody knows what it is, but not really. Like there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, same as any other job. But
Yeah.
most people think that they know, oh, recruiting is a headhunter. You find people and you get them hired. What was your presupposition or assumption about recruiting, and was it different from what it actually was, and how so?
I think my initial conception or perception of recruitment was similar to what it was in the beginning. So I knew it would be a lot less like high pressure or transactional in the sense, or in comparison to banking or what I've done before, right? It'd be more like real estate, so more relationship driven. But I think, and it was like that for a while, and then it changed quite significantly, and it has changed significantly over the last 9 years. So I think it depends on what you recruit in, the market that you choose, in terms of industry and the people, as to what recruitment is. There are very transactional types of recruitment, contract recruitment, temporary, that kind of thing is fairly transactional because it has to be naturally to be able to be successful. But then some of the requisitions that I worked, even from the beginning, were more like mid-level to senior level sales. So it took a little while. It wasn't a short process. It was there was a kind of fairly significant vetting stage for people to be able, well, firstly to understand the position and the company that you're recruiting for, but also to understand the people that you're recruiting. And I think that was the biggest, not shock, but I suppose I didn't expect as much of the involvement in how immersed you need to be in the business that you're hiring for. And quite rightly so. I think you can't really do it effectively for the most part until unless you understand the story, unless you understand why that company is hiring, who they are, and ultimately then what that looks like in terms of who's going to join next.
Why is that? If I were to say recruiting at a basic level, you get a series of requirements from a company, and you
Yeah.
go out and find someone. Why is it that you need to know the story and why they're hiring, and just not provide them a list of people that can come and
Yeah.
do the job?
That's fair. I think because you're at the risk of matchmaking if you're just looking for a list of requirements, one versus the other. AI will be able to do that soon. You probably can already. But when you're looking at the cultural side of a business and someone's character and how that personality fit works with the business culture and the longevity of that, that's what's important. And that's what you won't get from just looking at a brief or a job spec and then trying to match a CV to that. So I think, and also it makes the job more fun. It provides more value to you, and it makes it more engaging for you as a recruiter. You're immersed in it a bit more.
Well, so I was saying that it's, if you think about it from a sales engineer perspective, it's like saying, why don't you just get a list of requirements from your customer and just provide them a product?
5-minute demo.
Sure,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%. And I think you're right. You uncover so much more, getting that context from the story of the founder or the story of the business and whoever it is that you're working with within the business.
I actually have an example or a story about a recruiter not doing that.
Okay. It's not me, is it?
No, it's someone in Canada. It's not a bad recruiter or anything. I like the guy. We're friends now.
Yeah.
But what happened was they posted the job on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I applied to it. Never heard from them. 5 minutes later, the company, the main company, posted the same job on LinkedIn, and I applied to it, and I heard back within 5 minutes. Mainly because I didn't have any of the requirements that they had listed, but I worked for the customer that they're trying to break into.
Okay.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So having that information would have been good. Now
Yeah.
I know they targeted people within the company and got them to come and have a conversation, but they just skipped me because I didn't have the requirements. Yeah, it's fun.
Honestly, I guess that's something. Well, part of what I've been talking to people about quite a lot recently over the past 12 months is obviously there's a lot of people looking for work, and I think when people are applying for positions, the longer it goes on, the more widespread or the more they open the net and their focus. And I think doing that, you then start to lessen the value of your experience versus well, not even versus anything, but you just lessen the value of your experience, and it becomes more difficult rather than easier. By spreading a net, it becomes harder.
Yeah. I guess that's a debate because at that point, what are their options? They're spreading the net because they're running out of options.
Of course.
So they have to find other ways to I've done that where I've applied to industries that are not my industries. They're adjacent. Like let's say I'm in networking and I apply to like data center IT stuff.
Yeah. But the reason I thought of that is because of what you said about applying for that job, and you didn't have the requirements, but you knew the customer, and that's one of the things I tell people. There's some things under those layers of the surface stuff where if you know the customers that the company are working with, but you're not necessarily steeped in experience from a technology standpoint, that sometimes is as valuable and more valuable. You got it.
Yeah, I got it. Well, they offered the job to the other person that the recruiter brought in, and he said no.
Fine.
He was my friend. He was telling me everything that was happening.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
inside man.
And then a month later they offered me the job because they couldn't find any. I was like the last choice, but hey, I got it. I'm happy.
There you go. Best till last.
Yeah. So from the employer side, well, like, what's the most common mistake you have to kind of nudge them away from while they're looking for their SE, because this is an SE focused.
Yeah. I think expectations of some of the things that we just talked about. So the three things you talked about, the level of expertise in certain areas or the level of exposure to certain customers or client network versus where they're hiring, geographically, what they're looking for budget-wise and what they're going to pay. There's a few things that you have to, I suppose, realign with them, or at least, and whether you do that verbally, and it depends on your relationship with the customer or the client that's hiring, whether you can talk to them about that and they trust your opinion, which takes a little while, or whether you have to work with them to show them this is what you're asking for, and this is ultimately what you're going to have to do to get that. So I think that's one of the big original or initial misalignment in terms of expectation versus reality, and guiding them through that process, either by or with evidence-based work.
You just reminded me of like real estate, like salespeople, like realtors, where they get a brand new married couple, and they have a list of all these requirements, and then a budget of like $5,000.
Champagne taste, beer money.
Yeah. So then, all right, let's go see that house that you're looking for. How much do you think it's worth? It's like, 15 times what we're able to pay. All right, maybe we should adjust our expectations. I always thought of like customer, like job descriptions are more like a wish list.
100%, exactly what they are. I think it's a checklist, isn't it, really? And if you have all of those things, like you said, then you're a shoo-in. But the chances are, and that's why there's value in using people like us, recruiters generally or headhunters generally, because they don't always exist, or not in the way that the client expects. And sometimes there's, again, from the discovery that you do with them, as with pre-sales, you find out that what's on the page isn't necessarily what they really need. So I think, aligning expectations is probably the thing I spend most of my time doing. And the type of profile, probably a bit more clear-cut now, although I appreciate there's still, certainly within solutions engineering, different companies have different perceptions of what they are or what they do. And then it's talking them through that. Not sure if it's a mistake. The first thing that comes to my mind is, it's a fairly recent thing, but it's the whole remote versus hybrid versus in office. It's that whole debate, and it's people that the perfect opportunity comes along, and it's within commutable distance, but the flexibility seems to have it's shifted so much in the last couple of years, both ways, both candidate side or job seeker side and client side. I'd say the rigidity now of both companies and candidates to have their camp and stay in it has changed drastically. I don't know if that's a mistake, but that's certainly something that's changed culturally, both sides of the conversation, that has become something new to navigate that has never really been that significant before. I think mistake-wise, probably similar to what I said before with the clients. And again, over the last couple of years, what we've seen with salary, for example, salaries have spiked incredibly. And this is the same in the UK as it is in the US, where 2022 in isolation, really, either side, there's some time that is included in this. But to get the talent that companies wanted, one of the main things they did was provide blank checks almost. And that's really increased the ranges of salaries that people were on, and are looking for moving forward. And I don't think that's sustainable or has been sustainable, and that's what a lot of people I'm speaking to now that are looking passively or actively are having to. That's the irony. Yeah, the big tech companies that did a lot of that hiring of people and paying them lots of money were then one of the first ones to let them go. That's true. That's true. Confidence, I suppose, but misplaced.
So actually, like, if you were to give advice to people looking for a job, what advice would you give them?
So to touch upon kind of what I suppose what I was talking about earlier on, I think, and I totally appreciate what you're saying and what you said earlier on, Ramsey, where we were talking about casting a wider net and how naturally that feels like by law of averages it should be more successful. But I think being able to define your value or what you bring to problem as SEs, right? A lot of what you do on a day-to-day basis within the job, but treat it like a sales process almost. So, figure out the areas that you're looking to focus on. So I would always say pick 2 or 3 to start with. And you mentioned them earlier on, to be fair. Industry, in terms of technology, so what you've worked with, whether it's, I know AI is broad, but AI, machine learning, health tech, whatever your commercial experience is, that's something you can focus on as long as you want to stay in that field. The customer base that you've worked with, whether that is relevant to another type of technology or business or industry vertical. Another thing as well, and this is in an ideal world, but interests and passions, right? So I appreciate that's not always easy, and sometimes people's interests don't align with a position, a commercial escapade. But I think having those focus points and then using a kind of sales methodology almost to kind of prospect, find businesses in those areas, network with the people within those businesses, that whether they have open positions or not. I think a lot of companies are optimistic or opportunistic. Exactly. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So figure out exactly who it is that you want to approach, and I think much like SE work and much like you just described there, Ramsey, what solution or what problem you solve for them with your experience, with your background, and that's, again, like you say, that's how you create the customer profile, or at least that's how you approach them, right?
Yeah. Well, and it'll help you build in like your resume at that point. Resume,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, you can improve it. You can figure out like what the competitors. So we talked about like casting a wide net. Like I'm in networking, I want to apply to IT. I'm gonna be weak in these areas. Like I don't know SQL or whatever. I know networking, but I'm good at these areas, which is like sales or whatever. So when I'm talking to them, I'm highlighting these, I'm low lighting those. So okay. And then you said prospecting.
Yeah.
This is something sales engineers hate doing in general. Most people hate doing. How do you recommend people prospect?
Yeah, fair question. So without any other tools or platforms to be able to like create lists or reports, things that I always found useful when I was starting was industry trade shows, and not going to them necessarily. I mean, that's great if you do, but every trade show and exhibition has an exhibitor list. So, and usually those trade shows or exhibitions have an industry focus, right? So one of the things that I would do would be go onto the website of the exhibition or the trade show that you're interested in, or that that companies that operate in the industry you're interested in go to. Look at the floor plan, check out all of the different company names, and then ultimately look at those companies on LinkedIn. I suppose would be the easiest thing to do, the first place to go, and connect with some of the senior people, the people within the teams that you would look to work within. So if it's solutions engineering or sales engineering, the managers of those teams, the seniors on those teams, and connect with those people, and then open a conversation with them. Not necessarily about a job particularly, but again, kind of something else that talk about storytelling, which I know is big in SE world. If you've got a compelling story for that person that will resonate with them and what they do or what their company does or their value proposition, then start a conversation about that. Has it done that? Yeah. I've also been on like marketing training courses, specifically to LinkedIn, not run by LinkedIn, that have said that it also sometimes is better just to connect and not include a message, but have in the same breath so not necessarily your job title, in your, like, as it were, your CV job experience, but in your headline under your name, have a headline that catches their attention, or that has, and what I mean by catches their attention is it gives no doubt as to what it is that you do. So like mine is recruiting pre-sales solutions. So as soon as someone clicks on your profile and after a connection request and sees what you do, they shouldn't have to read a message to figure out what it is you're connecting with them for. I think it depends. I think do it, but I also think you have to make sure you pick the right partners, and I think that just means they have some relevance to your world, right? So whether it's industry specific, usually recruitment companies or recruiters will have a focus of some kind, right? So whether it's what we do and that's discipline specific, or whether that's industry specific, again, I'll use AI as an example, or financial tech. Sometimes companies will have a particular vertical focus, but they'll recruit all sorts of people. And sometimes they'll have discipline specific teams like we do. And then they can be a little bit more agnostic when it comes to industry. So as long as you're picking relevant people, and it's like when you sell your house, right? I mean, you get a few opinions when you get at valuation stage. You get 2 or 3 different realtors around, or estate agents, they're called in the UK. And not only do you go with one you feel most comfortable with in terms of the value that they're bringing, numbers in the housing example, but also the relationship you build with them, right? I think there needs to be a level of trust between the person that is working to help you find a job, and I suppose the associated output.
For me, like I always say, connect with recruiters, even if you don't reach out and say like, "Hey, help me get a job." At least now they have better visibility into you. Like if they do a search,
Yeah,
you're easier to find versus a fifth connection
yeah,
from somewhere. So I never thought like, hey, let me jump on the call with them and waste their time, ask
yeah,
them for a whole bunch of stuff, and then get a job somewhere else.
yeah,
That's you never want, like, even as a sales engineer, you don't want a customer to come and call you and jump on a call with you, because it's
yeah, of
happened with
course.
us, and then go
Yeah,
to with the same company, just different area, different country, buy that stuff and ship it over. Right?
yeah,
It's annoying. But
yeah. No, I see what you mean. I think it's again, that's why it's so important to like my focus is what it is. My network is mostly, pretty much entirely, the world that I work in or the people that I work with. So whether it's I can add immediate value to somebody's job search, or whether I can't, ultimately at some point I might be able to, and vice versa. So I think there is such thing as wasted time. Of course there is. But I think it's just making sure that the people that you're connecting with are, or at least spending time with, are relevant, and yeah, there's a conversation to be had, one that's got some substance.
But I like what you said. Basically, jump. Like, if you want to jump on a call, you can jump with a bunch and see who you feel most comfortable with and who's going to help you the most,
Yeah,
and then stick with that person. Don't waste
yeah,
everybody else's time. Um, I mean, if
yeah,
someone else, yeah, yeah. So that's my thought around that. The one thing that I noticed also, you said, like, in terms of prospecting,
yeah.
is you didn't say just apply to every single job out there, right?
No,
Because that's what most people think about prospecting. Oh, I found this
yeah,
job on LinkedIn. I'm gonna apply, and that's me getting leads. And
yeah.
it's not.
No, no. I think, yeah. Not. I wouldn't advise that, and for all the reasons that, I mean, you probably know and mentioned. But I think it also just, yeah. Oh well, I mean, off the back of what I said about the strategic approach of what where your experience is, who you know, that kind of stuff. I think there's not going to be hundreds of or thousands of opportunities that fit into those categories. But I also think that there's an emotional toll that it takes on you, as a job seeker, to go through that many applications. And I know a lot of people. I've spoken to a lot of people actually that will tell me they've applied for 500 jobs or 300 jobs, and I think there's an emotional impact that has on people, an effect that has on people as job seekers, which then can have a knock-on effect into the interview processes that they are a good fit for, and the way that they perform in those interviews. But I also think, as much as it might not seem like it takes a long time, I think that time can be better spent crafting that compelling story, or that pitch, that resonates with the companies within those categories that you craft out, and that does take a while. You'll spend hours, at times, crafting different approaches and having different conversations. But I think the people I've spoken to that have done that, whether it's been before I've spoken to them or after I've spoken to them, seem to have had a lot more success, and just have a lot more. Well, they get a lot more out of the conversations that they have, whether there's a job at the end of the day or not. They seem to have a lot more substance in those conversations, and there's a lot more value that comes from those. And one day those conversations might turn into something else, but I mean, there's no harm in networking with relevant people, right? Okay. I think startups is an interesting one. Again, it depends what number you are on the team. So if you're the first person in the team, whether the interview process is different or the person they're looking for is different, or both, but usually you have to have quite a varied background in terms of experience, and obviously that then can make the conversations more lengthy, more in depth, more interesting, and usually led by founders or senior people within startups. But you can also expect one of two things from startup interviews generally. I think the processes can be fairly different. So I think sometimes with startups that have hired before and kind of and know what they're doing and have the process in place or have an idea of what the process they want to follow, they are more aligned or more like companies that have been doing it for years and companies that have been hiring people for years. But sometimes the processes can be quite sporadic, or a mess. That's. I was trying to be politically correct, but yeah, a mess. And I think that's fine. Okay, good to know. But I think that is also purely down to the fact that the people that are interviewing are also running a business every day, and they're in the trenches and that kind of stuff. So I would say startup interviews can be run very well. They're usually, if you're one of the first employees or one of the first founding members of the team, expect to do more than the job description suggests, and the conversations that you'll have can be well structured, but can also be a mess.
So, I've worked for bigger companies. I've interviewed for different kinds of companies. When I interview for an SE role or an SE manager role, a lot of times they want you to be an SE and not mess up and be good with a salesperson and all that.
Yeah.
When you're interviewing as a first SE at a startup, what do the founders care about more than anything else?
I'd say probably a couple of things. I mean, beyond the obvious fit and ability to work with the technology and work with the customers, I think that's where what we're talking about right at the beginning of the conversation, cultural fit and the character of somebody, there will usually be, well, as we said, there'll be a much larger workload for this person. So I think somebody that has no misconceptions of that, and somebody that really buys into the mission, buys into the value proposition, and can provide a really succinct, kind of concise answer to why they would want to work there, or what motivation drives them to work for that business. I genuinely think that's something that I've noticed quite a lot more recently, actually, that has a lot more onus on it. Is not just because growth opportunity. I mean, yeah, that's there, right? But I think that's a huge thing, the motivation behind somebody wanting to join the business and their motivations behind that, but also their commitment to it is huge, because obviously they'll come with some form of investment into the business, equity, stock, that kind of stuff. I also think the ability to challenge, and what I mean by that is challenge the founders, and not everyone wants that. There's a fine line, right? But I think founders that know, the saying is hire people that are smarter than you, right? But that are hiring people that they know will help them build the business, will challenge them in the right way with solutions, not just with problems. That's another big thing. I think the confidence to do that, and the background to be able to do it right.
It's interesting you say that, because I've seen founders who want that, and I've seen founders who hire like SEs who've never had any SE experience just so that they become gophers and not challenge them. Just do what I say, the way I say it. And I would never want to work for that kind of founder who just, you're not good at honestly, most founders, they think they're good at sales and pre-sales. They might be good at one of them.
Yeah.
They're not good at both.
No.
Or they might be technical and not good at any. Right? So
yeah, but there are also founders that say that they want someone to challenge them, and then when someone challenges them, they realize they don't. Fine. So I think where were we at? We were prospecting.
Yeah, where the selling is the interview process, I guess.
The selling is
So
the interview
two-way
process.
selling.
Fine. I think having an idea of, I mean, negotiations obviously are part of the sales process, right? Yeah. So I think having an understanding of the full economic picture within an offer. I think a lot of people's hang up is on base salary, bonus, which obviously is fundamental, right? You have to be able to earn enough money to live and all that stuff. But I think digging into questions with whoever it is you're interviewing with, right? And usually it's going to be the hiring manager that can answer this the most comprehensively. But the dynamics of the offer itself, so not just the financial stuff, but depending on the position that you're in, what's the part? And I know these are all questions that people think about for sure, but I think the question is, do you ask the hard questions at the point you're talking to the hiring manager about an offer or accepting a position? And I think asking the hard questions around progression and what something is, how to get there, whether there's metrics and milestones to reach those, how formal they are, how formal they can become if they're not. I think those are the types of things that people think about but don't necessarily challenge hiring managers on. I also, from a recruiter standpoint, and again, this is fairly common, I would say, is transparency. If you're working with a third party, I think communication and transparency is massively important along the whole process, to be honest. And I think generally, even if you're not working with a recruiter, it's important because it's hard. Effectively communicating with people you don't really know that well is very hard. But I also think it produces green and red flags throughout the process and will ultimately show you signs of whether good things are to come or there are potential things that might not be so good that you might be able to avoid before you get to that point. I think that's something to try and people to try and implement. I've got information and content on that, both in terms of offer negotiation, but also generally asking questions around culture and that kind of thing, because I think that's important. Yeah. So
Okay, can you share those? Can you share those
Absolutely.
with me? I'll put them on
Yeah,
the
of
show
course.
notes for this episode.
Yeah.
The one thing I find, so something that SEs really need to do in general is, although they're not negotiating, they're starting the negotiation from the second they meet the customer. And it's similar with jobs where
Yeah.
you're adding value or removing value from yourself at the first meeting. Now, the hardest or the most annoying part for me is when I talk to a recruiter who can't answer, not like yourself, like a company recruiter, because that's the first interview, generally speaking, who can either push you through or block you based on how you answer how much money are you looking to make. And yet they can't answer any questions about culture or about like money is important, but it's not the end all be all. There's so many other things that I need to know to tell you, like how much money, like is it a junior SE role? Is it like, am I going to have to mentor other people? I'm going to have to take care of other people. Am I going to have to jump on other people's calls if they're not able to do it? These are all questions that I need to know before I tell you what my salary expectation is. But you can't answer any of those questions. So why are you asking me what my salary expectation is? Because that's not going to help. There was something else that was on my mind that I just right now completely forgetting. So we're going to move on.
It happens. But on that piece about internal recruitment, and I think this is probably as a result of having a lot of different types of roles to fill, usually across different teams, it's difficult for them to have the time or the freedom to, unless they've been there for a long time and they understand the business really well. And there are loads of really good internal recruiters out there that do. But I also think there's some that kind of fall victim to not just being spread too thin and not being able to understand or have the time to invest in understanding those parts of the business, unless they've been there for a long time. So I think that, that's probably as a result of that type of stuff that they're just stretched quite, especially the last year or almost 18 months that the market's been crazy. There's not been, the people that have been hiring have had, hundreds of applicants applying for the jobs that they've got. So I think it just comes down to time, and that's no excuse for them, but I think it's just reality.
But that's why I prefer working with like third-party recruiters, because it's not black and white.
No.
Like, I can talk to you. I can tell you this is my expectation, and you can tell me, Ramsey, I think you deserve that much, but these guys don't have that budget. Whereas you get ghosted by the internal recruiter, or they just get a message, an email saying like whatever. Will you help me set my expectations properly, and then we go and talk to them. We're both incentivized. We're all incentivized by the same thing.
Yeah.
You're looking to provide a good hire so that you can keep having business with that company, right? So it's not really necessarily about the milking every extra cent.
No, but also we get the perspective from the different industries and businesses, right?
So yeah, that's always interesting because people tend to look at recruiters as, oh, you're just trying to make like the most out of me. Whereas like, all right, if I make $5 extra out of you, if I risk making $5 extra out of you and then lose the entire deal, was it worth it?
No.
Yeah. So that's why I like going through third-party recruiters. It's like having a champion internally.
Yeah. An ally.
Yeah. All right, and then the negotiation. My thoughts are on negotiation. Like, I know we're at the top of the hour. I don't know if you have a few more minutes.
Got some more time, yeah.
Okay. When it comes to negotiation, I have the feeling that if they really like you, they'll offer you whatever they can to make sure you get hired.
Yeah.
And then most people say like, oh no, don't take the first offer. Always negotiate. What are your thoughts around those two thoughts?
So I think it goes back to kind of the communication piece I was talking about a second ago, right? If you've communicated your expectations or what you're looking for throughout the entire process, not necessarily even just money, but generally across the board, ambitions and what you want to be able to do within that position within the company. I think if the company can't do that and they're open with you about that, and they make you an offer that isn't what you were expecting, but it comes with here's why and here's what we're willing to do to kind of show our commitment to you, then I don't really think it depends on whether you want to join the company, how badly you want it, right? I think there has been a bit of a cultural thing with hiring where sometimes companies will try and offer 5,000 less or a little bit less and to see if they can get that person on board for a bit less. I don't think it's hugely common, but I've definitely seen it before. But I think, generally speaking, if you're happy with an offer, then, and again, based on how competitive the market is, I think it's, you're happy with the offer in the company, then I don't think there's a need to renegotiate. I think if there's other things that you're looking for that aren't in the offer, again, that aren't necessarily numerical, then good time to have a conversation about those and see if there's anything that can be formalized within an offer or within a, I don't know, a 6-month review or whatever. But there's times where it's good to renegotiate. There's times where I think it's almost in vain. And that's another reason why working with a third party is really beneficial for that process. Not to plug myself, but I just think we want the best for both parties. And we're also, we obviously want the people to get the positions from a selfish perspective, quite frankly, partly. But overarchingly, I think we want to get the best for both people, but we're also the conduit to do that. So we can that communication piece I mentioned. Yes, they're our client, the business, and yes, the person we're working with to get that job is also our client in some way. We can communicate quite honestly with both sides without the fear of anything really. So it's quite impartial in that respect.
I just did some quick math on that $5,000.
Go on.
Based out of Canada. Generally speaking, when you're SEs, you're usually in the highest bracket, tax bracket. So that will be $100 per paycheck if you get 26 paychecks a year. Right.
It's funny you do that. That's what I do. I've done that before.
Yeah, so I've done it with my clients. Like, oh, they offered me $3,000 less than I want.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, let's do some math. Like, $3,000, that's $89 a month, a paycheck.
Yeah.
Do you want the job? You're increasing your salary by $40K.
Yeah.
Is that what's going to make or break the deal for you? But it's also like crappy. Like, you can tell by if the company is lowballing you.
Yeah.
You can tell the culture you're going into.
Yeah. and that's a conversation that we all have with our clients and present an offer. If we suspect that at all in any way, which luckily it doesn't happen as often or
Yeah,
very
sometimes
often.
that's all they can afford, or that's all that
Yeah.
they have their HR brackets or whatever.
Yeah, they have to treat their salary bandings the way that they do, because to be able to, it's like it can't be one rule for one. No, definitely not.
Because
Yeah.
I've done that, and like the
Yeah.
promise was not fulfilled.
No, I hear that a lot.
Yeah, sorry,
But
like
that's what,
it's a bad time of year. We can't give it to you. You deserved it. You earned it, but we just can't do it for you anyways.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? Leave? Stuff like that. So
Yeah. That's why it's good to try and formalize as much as you can. I know sometimes it's difficult and sometimes people won't agree to it, but I think like having something in an offer or a contract that states at the 6-month mark, we will review your pay, or we will review your performance to, look at. Yeah.
right? And it's not based on quota, because they can mess up my quota all the time. Right?
Yeah.
Like they can just increase your quota, but yeah, that's interesting. But basically, if I understand you correctly, there isn't, like, in sales, you provide a proposal and then there's negotiation. It doesn't sound like it's that way in job. It might be a little bit, but you're negotiating from basically setting the expectation from day one. This is what I'm looking for, and if they keep saying yes, then let's keep talking. And by the end of it, they don't get you what you asked for, then why did you keep going?
Yeah. In an ideal world, that's how it works. But we don't live in an ideal world, unfortunately, Ramsey. So it happens less often than I'd like. A bit more creative.
Yeah, that's the one difference I would say between a sales process and a job hunting process is, in a sales process, you're looking, from all these different prospects that you're getting, you're looking to land 10, 20, 30, whereas at a job process, job hunting, all you need is one.
Yeah.
Right? So,
yeah. Which you could say is tougher, is dependent.
I mean, you have a better chance of landing just one versus having to close 10 or 20 or whatever it is that you need to do to hit quota.
Yeah.
Is there any other thoughts, any questions you were hoping I was going to ask you that I didn't, or is there any trail of thought that you want to continue with the sales process?
I don't think so. I think the questions have been pretty good. So in terms of the strategy, I think that's kind of what I've been speaking to people about, all of the different disciplines that I work in, but it seems to apply fairly well to most of them. And it's been,
We usually jump into the not so fire round, but we're 8 minutes past our time together. I still have time if you want to go through it, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Go on. I don't know what it is, but let's go.
Oh, that's so fire round. These are the same 4 questions I ask almost every guest, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Starting with question number 1 is, what do you love about recruiting for sales engineers specifically?
I think the community, to be honest. I think it seems as though from the conversations I've had and the things I've been a part of, that everyone, for the most part, wants to try and help each other out.
The best community in the world. That's what I say.
There you go. You haven't even paid me to say that either. Excellent.
Yeah, I use the Canada Post, so it might never get there.
Yeah.
Question number 2. What would you consider is your superpower?
Oh, that's a good question. What, one that I'd want or one that I've got?
Let's do both. Let's start with what you want and what you got, and then go to what you want.
Okay. What I've got, I think just the ability to connect with people on a level where I kind of understand them, and not just in a job search process, but also as an individual, and kind of their ambition and what drives them. That's where I think I have a superpower. If I'm gonna say I have one, I'd like to fly. Everyone probably says that.
No,
What would yours be?
My superpower?
Yeah.
Probably freezing time with 3 kids.
That's a good.
3 kids.
That's a good one.
Either freezing time or teleporting.
Have you seen Click?
Adam Sandler? No, I chose not to watch. I love Adam Sandler. I chose not to watch that one.
Okay. Yeah.
For some reviews. But yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. It's like you can just pause and do stuff.
Yeah. There's a British TV show, really old, called Bernard's Watch, and it's about a school kid that has a watch that stops time. So that might have better reviews, but I doubt
Honestly, I just want to stop time and sleep for a little bit.
it.
That would be nice. Question number 3. I've never actually asked that question, but is there a book about job hunting that you would recommend?
Not that I've read. I think a book that I've read that I'm sure a lot of people that are listening might have seen or probably read is Simon Sinek's book.
Which one specifically? Start with why?
Yes, it Start With Why. That helped me a lot when I was kind of trying to understand my approach to recruitment.
It's somewhere.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, so around the house somewhere. Probably the kids read it. So the last question of the not so fly around, Chris, is there a habit you're working on to improve in your personal or professional life?
Consistency in both. So I think personally, like from a habit perspective, like healthy habits. So I journal quite a lot, or I'd like to journal more, and write creatively. But then I also think, and fitness, I'm quite into fitness and going to the gym consistently, eating healthily consistently, avoiding alcohol in London is quite difficult. I'm sure. So I'm trying to improve
All of them?
pretty much, yeah, simultaneously. No, but probably more so like the holistic stuff. So like looking after myself, things like the fitness part, eating healthily. I just came off of a 3-day water fast, which was very interesting.
You fasted off water, or you just had water?
Just had water.
Okay.
So
Fasting
no
off
food
water
for 3 days.
3 days is not recommended.
No.
We're not doctors here, but
Yeah, medical advice. But no, that wasn't fun. But yeah, I think working on, but then that because I think that affects your professional life, right? Everything in your personal life has a knock-on effect in your professional life,
and vice versa.
and vice versa.
Where can they find you? You can
Find me on
advise them to
LinkedIn.
find you on LinkedIn.
Okay, fine. I didn't know you could do that here. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. Ramsey Connected, so I'm sure you'll find us through there. There's a lot of content on there that's pre-sales related, recruitment related. Yeah, if anyone has any ideas and they want to share those and what I can do next, then I'm all ears. But yeah, LinkedIn's where I am mostly. And I just think from a job seeking perspective, as I am, stay consistent, but also try and create and understand your value, your story, and that will help you to secure more valuable conversations. Whether that's a job at the end of it, there will be one at some point, but I think you'll have a lot of interesting conversations along the way.
100%. All right, Chris, that's the end of the show. I really appreciate your time.
Cool.
And I think we can sign off.